I will hand it over to Ty.
Hello and welcome to the ISM webinar for purchase order. We're going to go through some of the key features that are in purchase order. Some you might already know about, some you might not already know about, but I'll try to go through and just cover all of them. So here's kind of what we're going to be reviewing today, and I might throw in a few extra things, but these are the main key ones that we're going to touch on is auto-generating purchase orders from sales orders. The auto reorder selection that is in Sage, especially if you are using in inventory, if you're using Sage to track your stock levels, your reorder points. This is kind of where this gets triggered in the system to auto-generate instead of manually creating purchase orders in the system. I'm going to briefly touch on landed costs. We have a few clients that I know bring in packages from overseas. And so I'm going to briefly touch landed costs. Maybe you can use this as a way to track your costs as it comes in, your duty and your freight from overseas transactions. I'm going to show you purchase order history inquiry. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is if you're on a newer version of purchase order, and when I say newer version, I'm talking like version 2016, I think is when it got included or higher. Sage now has the ability to have history just like sales order. So a lot of customers go into purchase order and they have thousands of purchase orders that are in the system from a long time ago that are still open, sitting out there in the system. Well, Sage now has the ability to now put purchase orders in history, so you can technically clean up your purchase order list, your purchase order entry list. So now you have a very narrow, the actual purchase orders that you're working. And then once purchase orders are completed, deleted, or closed out, they'll move into history, just kind of like how the sales order module currently does. Then we're going to briefly go over purchases clearing, how that all works and functions in the system, why stuff shows up in the purchases clearing, how the purchases clearing report works. And then I'm just going to take you through the utilities that are in Sage, some of the purging utilities that are in there for purchasing, in terms of the ability to be able to clean up your purchase order in the system and kind of make it a little bit more streamlined than maybe you currently have it right now in the system, and purge out a lot of that open data that's just sitting out there in the system. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, let me open up my Sage. So I'm already in my Sage 100 system. As you can see here, I'm running the new version of Sage. I'm not running the Sage 100C per se in terms of the whole thing. I'm running some of the pieces of the new Sage 100C. We have a webinar on that if you want to see more on that, how the new Sage 100C works. The difference between the C and the regular version of Sage is the Sage 100C gives you the ability to do some application sizing. It means the words can be bigger or smaller. You can email am@goism to get more information about that, but I'm running kind of the new view and the new look and feel of the new Sage 100, especially if you're running an older version of Sage 100. So let's go ahead and continue. Auto-generating purchase orders from sales orders. So I can just dive in here and go to the auto-generate from sales orders that is in Sage 100 in the system, but there's multiple ways of you having the ability to auto-generate that from a sales order. So if you had somebody that enters a bunch of sales orders and maybe the purchasing department for you is separated from the sales team and the purchasing handles all purchasing and sales order handles all sales orders, this might be the solution for you in the system. There's various features and setups in here that you have. Whether you take comment lines and they come over into the purchase order, the costing that's used, the order quantity, do you want it to reorder the full amount of the sales order, or do you want to just reorder the quantity that is short or the quantity that is actually required from the sales order? Whether you want to update the unit cost with the sales order cost, especially this is the ability if you're doing a lot of drop ship orders. This is a quick and easy way to generate a bunch of drop ship POs based off of sales orders that have been flagged for drop ship during the sales order entry process. So pretty much when you go into auto-generate from sales orders, it's assuming that you already have entered sales orders in the system, and all you simply do is hit proceed. print, and then you can review the listing that comes from that in the system. So if I go through the system and view my purchase order listing of the purchase order that it thinks that it needs to generate, I'm going to go, and it can consolidate orders. So it just depends on how you want to set that up, whether you want to consolidate multiple sales orders onto one purchase order by vendor, but you still have the ability to go look at the purchase order and actually see which sales order it belongs to, so that when you do a receipt of goods and you print that back order fulfillment report, you can kind of see what purchase order, or should I say what sales order, that those quantities belong to. So here's my auto generate in the system. It looks like I have a few parts, but it only belongs to 2 different vendors. And all I simply do is say, yes, I want to generate those orders. The system automatically takes the next purchase order number that's in the system, and it will just go through and automatically generate those purchase orders in the system for me. I then have the ability to then go into purchase order entry then and review what that looks like in the system. So I'm just going to simply go into purchase order and see what I have here. And here's the first purchase order that it generated for me in the system for that first order, which was for the container. I can come over here and see the lines that was ordered. I'm just going to swing this out a bit and throw it over here just so it gives us the ability to view it a little bit better. You can see down here, it's telling me that this line belongs to this sales order, and this one over here, it belongs to that sales order, and you can see this line here belongs to that last sales order that's in the system. So if I want to, from here, if I want to go back and actually look at that, I can just right click on that, hit sales order entry, and I can automatically, if I want, jump back and look at that sales order if I just want to visually see for some reason what the quantities are to make sure they match, or maybe I want to adjust a quantity in the system. Maybe they said, no, well, now we only need 45. I want to make sure that I changed both of them at the same time. I have the ability to do that on the fly by just simply jumping back into that from the system. Up here at the top, I can also do the same thing. So here, if I click on that sales order button at the very top, it also has the ability to launch my sales order button directly from there. So if I'm linked to a sales order, I can click on that button and it will automatically launch. Or if you're old school like me, just hit Alt-M and it gives you the same capability in the system. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit accept to that, and I'm going to go ahead and close those out. So that's the auto-generate purchase order from sales order, from doing it through purchase order. The other way you can do this is if for some reason the salespeople are responsible at the end of the day potentially for their own orders in the system, I can do the same thing directly from sales order entry. So if I come into sales order in the system and I'm placing an order in the system for a customer of mine, and I purchase a part just like I would anything else in the system, and I'm going to order 100 of these. And I go to my totals. Over here, I have my Generate PO button. I can do the same thing here, and from here, I can go through and go ahead and auto-generate that purchase order while I'm staying straight in sales order, and I can go ahead and continue to enter order after order after order. If for some reason that had been linked to multiple vendors, it would have created all the different purchase orders that were needed in the system. So that auto-generate PO from sales order has 2 places where I can launch that from. In the purchase order, just going straight to the auto-generate purchase order from sales order, or I could just launch it directly while I was in sales order entry. The ability to launch it from sales order entry, that is controlled by your purchase order options. If you go into the setup for the generate PO from sales order, there is a bunch of setup features in the purchase order options. That is where you would launch that feature from and have the ability to do that. All right, let's move to the next item on our list. It's kind of simple, kind of easy. A lot of people skip over and miss it, but right here at the top of purchase order in the system, you have what we call our auto reorder selection. You have the ability to just generate a bunch of purchase order based off of your reorder points and so on and so forth that you have set up in item maintenance. So in this case, I'm just going to go hit proceed, and I'm going to preview this report. And what I get here in the system is my auto reorder report. So all it simply is doing is going to the system saying this is the item, this is the primary vendor which all these items are available for. It's looking at the quantities that I currently have on sales order to see what the available truly is going to be at the end of the day. And based off my reorder points and whether I have mins or economic maxes, it is then going ahead and recommending for me the reorder recommended order quantity. And then when I generate this purchase order, it's now going to create me purchase orders to be able to get me to this purchase quantity in the system. So like this one has a -6 available. I said the max that I want to have on hand at any time is 20. So it's going in the system and recommending based off of that in the system. This case, 20 is my max on hand because that's what I had set up. -18 is available. It's suggesting that I have 38 on hand that I need to purchase, 38 that I need to purchase so I can have that on hand at the end of the day. All I simply do at that, when I review the report, make sure everything looks good, I simply say yes, and the system will just go through and automatically generate all those purchase orders in the system for me. I then, just like anything else, it is just generating a purchase order. It is not going any further than that. I have the ability then to go into the system and then look at what it generated. So here's one of the ones that it generated for me, and here's another one that it generated for me based off of the quantities that it thinks that I needed to have stocked and held on hand for that. I would then follow whatever steps that I want to do for that. If I have paperless office obviously set up, I can automatically email that purchase order to the vendor, or if I don't and I just want to simply print it, I can just print that purchase order and fax it or do whatever how I normally send the order out to wherever it needs to go. All right, so let's go ahead and let's slip right into landed costs from here. So landed cost happens whenever I do a receipt of goods in the system. So whenever I go into the system to do my receipt of goods, and I'm actually receiving that in the system, and I'm actually have that so I know what I'm receiving in the system, I have that ability at that time to say, yes, I'm going to receive this whole order in the system. Let's go ahead and just assign and do our lot serial distributions for all of these.
And Ty, we have a question when you have a moment.
Oh, go ahead. While I'm going through and assigning these quantities, go ahead.
So someone is asking, can you generate a PO from sales order for each sales order and not combine the orders?
Yes. You wanted, yes, we can. So it is a setup feature in purchase order. So if I come into, and let me just, I'll come back to this. So let me just cancel this and I'll just digress and show you that really quick. If I go into purchase order in the system, in the generate, where is it in my system? It might be on the sales order right here where it says combine sales orders by vendor. If I uncheck that box, it will then create a purchase order for every single sales order. And then I have the ability to that, if I do that, I can make the purchase order number be the sales order number, and if it requires more than one purchase order for a single sales order, I can tell it where do I put that incremental value. So it's going to put like a 1, a 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9. Obviously, it'll start with 0 to 9, so I can create up to 10 purchase orders for a sales order, but I can tell it to put a numeric 1 through 0 at the beginning or the end of the purchase order number, as long as I'm only using a 6-digit purchase order number. And then that way I can also look up in the system to match, okay, if it's this purchase order number, I automatically reflexively know which sales order number that belongs to. All right.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's continue back to what we were working on. So, purchase order. Let's go ahead and let's jump back into landed cost. So when I go into purchase order and do my receipt of good, I'm going to take the next receipt number. Let's go ahead and grab our order. I'm going to receive my lines, and I keep receiving one that has a lot of lines. Let me make sure there's none. Okay, this is a perfect one. Over here is my landed cost. So when I track my landed cost, if I need to track that in the system, I can track if there was duty, that when I had to worry about it, when I hit the docks, maybe they charged me $525 in duty, and maybe I got charged $100 in extra freight for my landed cost. I can track those costs in the system. It doesn't affect my actual stuff here because I might have paid it already, but I can add that landed cost into the system, because what I want the system to do is, I want it, when I post this, I want it to take that landed cost and divide it across the unit cost for my parts, so that the cost, when it gets received into the system, adds that cost so I can get the true cost of the item in the system when I post it. So it treats it a little bit differently than when I just simply do a receipt of goods in the system. I just put freight. Well, freight, when you do it on a receipt of invoice or a receipt of goods, that freight doesn't get rolled back into the actual cost of the item. But if I actually do a landed cost, when I post and update this into the system, it will adjust the standard cost of the item on each line to divide out whatever the landed cost, and depending on how I told the system to divide out the cost in the system, it can automatically divide that number evenly across all my inventory parts that are on here in the system. And you set the calculation of how you want it split, but yes, the system has that capability of doing that. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and post and update it, just because I need it in here for when we get to the purchases clearing part. So let me go ahead and put that in there. So here in this case, here's my report. Here's my purchase or receipt of goods. You can see here the unit cost is $3.75, and then it's showing that it's allocating that part of the duty and the freight. And so when this actually goes into inventory, the unit cost for this item is actually now going to be the $32. And you can see I obviously have a three-place decimal precision. It's going to make this the actual new cost that actually gets reflected into inventory for this part, and not the actual cost that was actually ordered on this. Like I said before, sometimes if you've linked the purchase order to a sales order, or even if you haven't, you have the ability in the system for it to automatically generate for you in the system what we call the back order fill report. So me receiving this is automatically showing me that I have these open sales orders that are potentially could be fulfilled for these quantities for the parts that I'm currently receiving right now. I'm going to go ahead and update this. And then I'm going to show you what the daily transaction register looks like, just so you can kind of see how the landed cost and so on and so forth is set up. So here's my GL entry. You can still see that the inventory is reflecting that actual number, but over here, this is where my duty and my freight is being allocated in the system so that it's recorded in the system. And then you can see it looks like I have some kind of negative balance adjustment that it's accounting for during this posting. All right, let me quickly just show you purchase order history inquiry. So this was never here. Receipt history inquiry and purchase order history inquiry. Simply what receipt history inquiry, well, receipt history inquiry was there. Purchase order history inquiry was not there. Purchase order history inquiry is simply the ability to go back and look at purchase orders in the system. And A simply means it's active, kind of how sales order works. You can see active ones. C's mean completed. So instead of these completed purchase orders that used to sit in your purchase order entry for, I think it was, what, 999 days or whatever those days were until it cleared off when you did your period end, now you can have them complete and move right away into purchase order history inquiry. So you can always come back here, look at what was actually on the purchase order if you so choose in the system, but at least now it's not cluttering up in your purchase order entry in the system. You don't have all these massive amounts in there. It truly goes to history once the purchase order is actually completed. So let's go ahead and look at the purchases clearing report. This seems to be always the one that I see clients and they have page upon page upon page upon page for their purchases clearing. So let's just discuss how purchases clearing works. How purchases clearing works is simply this. Whenever you do a receipt of goods, if there is not an invoice on it, it moves that into the purchases clearing, and there's a general ledger that's associated with it. And at any given time, if you print your purchases clearing report, these are showing items that you have potentially received that you have not invoiced the full amount for. So if you kind of look here in the system as I'm looking at these are items in the system that I have received quantities for, but I have not necessarily invoiced for. So the one that I'm focusing on here is this order down here, this 137, because I know this is the order that I just did just now in the system. So right now, when I look at this, I can see that this report is showing up on my purchases clearing just for the simple reason I did that, and I can see the amount. People don't reconcile this till the end of the month, but you should try to keep that reconciled if at all possible. What clears that off of your report is whenever you go into the system and you finally do your receipt of invoice in the system, that is when it will clear off the report and it will no longer be there. So if I go in the system, I'm going to just go ahead and receive this. For the full amount, and I'm saying yes. I've gone through and I invoiced it all in the system. If I need to add any additional freight, I can. So I'm going to go ahead and add some freight in there in the system just so it's there. At this time, you can also hold the payment. So if for some reason you need to do the receipt of invoice, but you do not want the payment, because you have the ability that when a receipt of invoice is done, it automatically shows up in an AP invoice. You have the ability here that I can flag this so it automatically gets posted into the system, but it will hold the payment so it's not automatically picked up in the system. And I'm just going to simply go ahead now and post that entry in the system and have it post, and then I'm going to show you what the purchases clearing is again, because now it will drop that off my report. So here is my receipt of invoice. It's showing me all the items that I am doing my receipt for. My purchases journal. So this is going to be going over to my AP. And then I'm just going to go ahead and update it. What's going to end up happening now is when I go back into my purchases clearing report, I am now going to notice that those items in the system have now dropped off my report. So now when I look at my purchases clearing, I'm back down to this original amount, and that invoice is now cleared off and ran off the report. Some people always ask, why is my purchases clearing report so huge, so big? What's going on? What's wrong? Typically, that means if your report is really, really big, for some reason, somewhere along the way, you have received more than you've invoiced. And if that's the case, then we will work together to help you get that report cleared up. You can just reach out to support@GoISM, and we can help you clean that up in the system. Last but not least is the utilities. There's various utilities in the system. I'm just going to go through each of them just to kind of show you. Purging completed purchase orders. If you want to just clean up your list based off of how many years you've set up to retain history, we can clean up all of the completed purchase orders. If you have master or repeating orders out there that have expired, we can just use this utility to clean them up. Most of all these utilities, the completed or recap reports, the obsolete purchase orders, the history, some of this history you have to wait until, especially now since purchase order retains history. In purchase orders, since you're now set to retain history, some of this purging is based off of how many years you're telling the system to hold. But most of them, you just tell them what you want to remove, and you're just setting the date to be on or before a certain date. So most of these utilities is pretty straightforward. It's going to just say you're going to remove it, and it's going to say on or before this date, and it will simply go through and purge based off of what date you've triggered in the system. So talking about history, that's the new piece. So in purchase order now on the history tab, this is where you now have the ability to say how many years that we're now holding history for. So I can come in here and tell the system this is how long I want to retain history for, and I can either make it more, less. It's just simply up to us how many years that I want to retain history for in the system. All right. Does anybody have any questions? And Carla, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, and I'm going to unmute the lines. We did have another comment. I'm not sure if you can see the questions under the question portion, but Angela had a comment about trying to use back to the purchase order, the sales order and purchase order from sales order. Can you see that comment? And I'm going to unmute. Hold on one sec. Oh, how do I unmute? Hold, please. I'm going to do it one by one. Okay, I think I've unmuted everybody. So, yeah, Angela wrote that we try to use this feature for multiple sales orders for one vendor. We currently enter the sales order, the sales orders we need, the sales order lines on the generations portion, but it always gives us every sales order in the system. Oops, did I mute you? Hold on, I think I muted Ty. That's not going to work. Hold on. Ty, I don't know how to unmute you. Hold on. Hold one moment, I somehow muted her. And Angela, you're still on the call? Or did we lose you? Hold 1 second. Sorry about this. I need to unmute Ty, and I can't seem to do that. Hold on 1 sec. Okay, Angela, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hang on 1 second. I'm trying to get Ty unmuted, so I apologize. Sorry, Ty. Hold on. There you go. Oh, I see it. Sorry, Ty. I got it. I apologize. I'm filling in for Sherry. Sorry. Are you unmuted now, Ty?
I am here. Can y'all hear me now?
All right. So you can see Angela. I'll stop sharing my screen, but you can see Angela's question there.
All right. No, I can't see anything in the chat. She must have just sent it to you. So if she can go ahead and tell me what it was, I'll answer it.
Okay, yeah, so when we're using the Autogenerate from sales orders, right now what we do is we have a vendor that we purchase product from them, and there's a couple of warehouses on the same invoice. So say like we have warehouse 001 and 002. So right now we're putting the sales order number that we want to generate in, and then the warehouse number that actually we want to pull in. But right now it's giving us, every time we do that, it gives us like multiple sales orders so on that PO. So we're not using this system right now because it's not working for us. Is there something that we're doing incorrectly?
Do you not want multiple sales orders on the same, or you want a single purchase order for every sales order?
No, I do want, like, if there's 15 sales orders that shipped out, I want to make sure that all those 15 for that one particular warehouse is on one PO. And right now, when we auto-generate the actual PO, the report comes up with all kinds of different POs on there, and not just the ones we need. So it actually auto-generates multiple sales orders, ones that we don't need on there. So right now we're doing, like, say we have sales order 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We enter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the sales order box, and then we hit proceed. But when we hit proceed, it generates everything that's in there.
Okay.
So I guess I might be doing something incorrectly.
All right. So are you using the filter down at the bottom to filter out to say you only want a specific warehouse, or are you always saying all sales orders?
No, we're doing, like I said, if I had sales order 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're actually putting 1, 2, 3, and then on the bottom we're doing warehouse 002, which is the warehouse we want to pull in. So when we do that, it's pulling in everything between those sales orders. Like, it is not just bringing those sales orders.
So I think
I don't know if we're.
I think the issue is the comma. Are you just trying to is it just the sales orders that you're trying to do? Because I don't think the comma is doing what you're anticipating. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
The Sage doesn't allow you to do commas on that. Your choice is either to say begins with, ends with, contains, equal to, or a range. Doing a comma in Sage means nothing to it.
Okay, yeah, because it used to work when we first started doing it, and we did it that way. It was working perfectly, and I think we upgraded something, and then after that, it just stopped working for us.
Did you used to have the auto PO generated from sales order before it was part of the Sage product?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I know some customers who own the mod. It used to be a mod years ago, and then Sage put it and incorporated it to be part of the product. And there are.
I think it was incorporated after. I don't think we've ever had it before, but we were originally using it, and then we must have we did something, added something or whatnot, and then it just now it no longer works for what we needed to do.
And are you trying? And when you say all, so if I put, say, for instance, sales order 1, sales order 3, sales order 5, are you saying sales order 2 and 4, which I don't even select, show up?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I have a feeling I can research it and we can get you an answer back on that. But I have a feeling it's just the way that how the selection criteria that, as far as I know in Sage, you cannot use a comma.
Okay. So maybe we could just do the vendor and then the warehouse or something like that. Okay, well, I'll figure it out. I'll kind of play with it now that you guys gave us a little bit more information on it, and then we'll see if it fixes the issue. If not, then we'll go from there. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, Ty. Anyone else? I'm unmuting everyone else. Any other questions? Nothing in the chat windows. Okay, perfect. Well, this concludes our presentation. We will be posting this. We recorded it, so we will be posting it to our YouTube channel. And keep an eye out for our next series of Lunch and Learns. Thank you all. Have a nice afternoon. Take care.